Hello, my friends. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time it is for you. And I have a video for you today, requested by a John Galt. He suggested that I do a video on the Undertakers of Bodie, California, which Bodie is an amazing ghost town. I have pictures. I've been there before, but this is before I started using YouTube. So I'm going to go back, but it's going to have to be springtime now because it's closed. They have too much snow up there, so they close it in September. Because Bodie, California is right on top of a mountain above Bishop, California. I'm sure some of you may not know where that is, but it's right on the border of Nevada and California. But before I get into talking about things, I wanted to show you, I stopped at the post office and I got a postcard. And this is from Susan Allison. And she has a YouTube channel. You guys need to go check her out. She lives in Utah. And she says, I love your channel. Keep up the great work. And you are amazing. So thank you, Allison. Those are really nice comments, and I really do appreciate them. Thank you so much. And you're pretty awesome yourself. So go to Susan Allison Vlogs, V-L-O-G-S, and she's got some interesting content. She does a lot of cemetery videos, which I love going through the old cemeteries. They're just awesome. So go over and give her some love, guys, and check out her channel. So thank you, Allison. It was that was a very pleasant surprise to go to the mailbox and find this postcard from you. So thank you very much. And now back to, to the subject of our video. Unfortunately, I did a lot of research and there's not a whole lot to find on Undertakers of the Old West, and especially in Bodie, California. I couldn't find a registry. I couldn't find an exact number of deaths or burials, or because it was pretty sketchy back then, and the town was very transient. And I know that they had many undertakers, but you know, the Old West is that way. Once if they find gold or silver or something, then you have like a ton of people throng into the area. And up comes a town with hotels and banks and all that kind of stuff. And then as soon as the mine starts playing out and they're not making money off the mine, it all disappears just as quickly as it started. And then you have ghost towns. Because they didn't tear the towns down or do anything. No back to nature stuff. They just up and left. And so this is kind of like Bodie, California. Like I said, it's right on the border of Nevada and California, and it's just an incredible place to go see. It's a very slow decaying ghost town. I mean, there's a lot of stuff gone, but there's an awful lot of stuff left to see. And I'll show you some of those pictures of the Undertaker's house that they had there. Excuse me. But this is going to be more or less like the Undertakers of the Old West, because I didn't find anything really specific to Bodie. So sorry, John. And the Undertaker was a position that was created when towns came into being. You know, when they'd find a gold strike or silver strike, and all of a sudden overnight there's a town. And people start building buildings and whatnot. And of course, with the mining and everything came a lot of deaths, disease, that kind of thing. So there was a need for undertakers, and they had no way of preserving bodies back then. So they wanted to bury them as quickly as possible for obvious reasons. And it wasn't just violence that led to many deaths. It was, out here in the desert is a harsh environment with scorching hot deserts and dehydration issues. Unfortunately, living in town didn't guarantee medical help either, or a proper burial. Doctors were few and far between in the old American West. So, you know, people died at an early age, because if you got injured and got infection, unless you were an herbalist or someone like that, or was friendly with a Native American healer, which they had them back then, and some of the white settlers did request help from them, and some of them were willing to help, if the ones that lived in unison with each other. So it was kind of like a live or die situation out here, and a lot of people died. The job of the town undertaker wasn't easy. Most of the undertakers were furniture makers that were doing double duties, or they were doctors that were handy with woodwork, and they made the coffins as were needed. The job of the town undertaker, like I said, was very difficult. And preserving the bodies in the 1800s consisted of soaking the bodies in arsenic or alcohol to help preserve them. Formaldehyde was actually discovered in 1859 by a Russian chemist. The invention of formaldehyde was important to the business of the undertaker, and because they were able to preserve bodies and give nice ornate funerals and that sort of thing, it actually made the undertaking business, and actually made it a business. By postponing the decay of the bodies, families could wait longer to bury the deceased until other family members arrived from other parts of the country. And this opened new opportunities for elaborate funerals and creating a booming business for someone who wanted to be an undertaker. Life expectancy was only 37 years of age out here in the West in the 1800s. So undertaking was a crucial business with so many people dying. In the mining towns, life was fast and violent. Not all, but a lot of them. For example, in Bodie, California, people had to step over dead bodies every morning, every single morning, when they went outside just to walk around town. And the sheriff had appointed people, deputies or whomever was willing to do it, to carry off the bodies to the undertakers for burial. And it is said that the church bells would ring out the number of years for the age of the deceased persons, and that the bells rang continuously day and night because there were so many. If the mining environment, accidents, saloon gunfights, and personal vendettas didn't get you, then illnesses would. It was reported that Bodie had as many undertakers as there were saloons, and there were a lot. I think at one point there were like 30 saloons in this mining town of Bodie. And that was a lot. That was a lot of them for one town. And I'm going to show you a few pictures of Bodie Undertaker right here. When someone died, he or she was cleaned by the family, dressed in a burial shroud, and placed in a box or a coffin made of wood such as poplar, cherry, walnut, or mahogany. Local cabinet or furniture makers often were hired, I'm knocking my camera around, to measure the deceased person to fit them for the coffin, and would build it, and many times on short notice. Any type of funeral would be carried out from the home, with burial taking place within 24 to 72 hours of the death. This allowed sufficient time for the deceased to awaken or stir if he or she wasn't really dead, but merely had lapsed into a coma. Seriously? I mean, how could you not tell if a person is dead? I don't understand that. I mean, if you're not breathing and there's no heartbeat and it's been like that for several hours, I think it's pretty safe to say that the person's deceased. But there have been incidences and not just out here in the West, but back east as well, that people were hurried to be buried, and then they would find out that the person woke up later that they weren't really dead, and that would just be a horrific situation to be in. I mean, can you imagine being buried alive? So what they did, and this is actually true, they would put bells, attach a bell to the toe of the deceased person. And the Undertakers, when they were patrolling the, if you hear clicking noises, it's my dog. Go, Sugar. Good grief. She's toenails on the tile. Anyway, if they woke up, they would kick their feet and ring the bell, and if the Undertaker heard them, then he could dig them back up. Or the caretaker, I mean. And I didn't find any evidence of anyone actually being dug up and found them alive. But there have been reports of people hearing bells ring, and by the time they dig them up, of course, in those tight little coffins, you didn't have much airspace. So I would imagine the person would suffocate anyway by the time they dug them up. Their ice buckets were placed around the room where the deceased person was, and ice could be placed inside the box with the deceased to help keep it cooler so the bodies would last longer. In the late 1800s, undertakers with storefronts began to offer more services, such as laying a body out in the parlor, in the storefront, which sounds morbid to me, but would actually sell coffins as well as non-funeral related goods. They offered transportation of the body via horse and carriage, and the direction of services. They would do what they do now. They kind of take over everything and organize it for the family for a fee. Not all undertakers had the store frontage to offer the family in a funeral outside of the home. So sometimes they could come to your home and conduct the funeral, or some of the places had parlors where you could kind of go do the funeral services and stuff like they do now. Okay, and here's some pictures of some of the storefronts. With the growing number of undertakers, I almost said architectures, becoming skilled in embalming, many started going into the death industry without having cabinet or furniture making abilities. And here's a few pics. People in moderate circumstances could only pay $200 for a funeral, which some usually included a dozen carriages. Well, you couldn't hire a dozen carriages nowadays for $200. So, but money bought a lot more back then. And here's a few pictures of the carriages. Many people considered undertakers in the same light as hangmen. Many people had a horror of the profession and would go blocks out of their way not to pass in front of an undertaker shop. The hangmen, it was actually a profession, and they were the ones that would pull the lever to release the door underneath the guilty party's feet so they would hang. And it was usually a public hanging, which, I don't know, back then there was so much death around everyone with accidents and shootings and whatever. I don't understand the morbid curiosity of people wanting to go watch someone strangled to death. I fail to understand that, but that's the way it was back then. It's sad that they had so little entertainment that watching the death of a person would be entertaining. Gives me chills. And on a curious note, today there are even many people, as in the early days, who had a mania for attending funerals. What prompts people to want to attend funerals of persons that they don't even know is a curiosity. Many have a morbid curiosity in regard to the dead, and they actually haunt morgues and funerals just to hang around with dead people. And it seems like these persons find some kind of comfort and pleasure in attending funerals, which to me is really bizarre. But I actually knew a lady. She was a nice little old church lady, and she was, the whole time I've known her, which was a very long time, she had this thing about she'd read the obituaries in the newspaper every morning. And then if she saw someone having a funeral close to where she lived, or someone she even remotely knew, she would go to these funerals and attend the funerals and, get involved in, people she didn't even know or remotely knew. And it was about, other than that, she was a reasonably sane person, but she just had this thing about attending people's funerals, and she just, I don't know what she got out of it, but it was just an obsession with her. So anyway, that was kind of a dark note to go on, but sorry, John, I couldn't find anything more specific to Bodie, but that kind of gives you a general idea of Undertakers of the Old West, and like I said, there wasn't a lot to find on the subject. So you guys, I'm going to end it here. I hope you enjoyed my short video. And I hope you all have a wonderful morning, good afternoon, good day, good evening, wherever you are. And I love you all, and thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.